just for Kelly for the multitude of the first presentation. We'll get into it after the break. If you want to stay on video, you are more than welcome to. We are going to preface with if for some reason broadband is becoming an issue, just know that we'll be shutting off video to help that out. But until then, feel free to stay on video, just stay muted. Couple things. AHI is very happy to collab with Hudson Mohawk AHEC and offer this amazing training. With that collaboration came continuing education credits. And so we have been approved for 2.25 continuing education credits for both social workers and physical therapists. There will be an evaluation that we're going to place in the chat, the link for that, and we will be sending it out afterwards. That evaluation is required for anyone that's looking to receive those credits, as well as if you're looking to receive a certificate of attendance. If you can't find the link, please feel free to email myself, Andrea, or Kelly, and we can get that out to you. But you will see an email following this presentation. So before I turn it over to Scott, I'm just going to give him a little introduction. Scott Lesnick is a global leadership keynote speaker, author, and trainer. His two books, Kid Jacked, A Father's Story, and Life Jacked, Life Lessons on Leadership, were recently published to critical acclaim. Scott recently received his CSP, Certified Speaking Professional designation, of which there are less than 700 speakers worldwide who have achieved this. Plus, he's run over 50,000 miles, which is twice around the planet. So please welcome author, TEDx speaker, and above average miniature golfer, Scott Lesnick.
It's a great intro. I love that. Hi, folks. Hope you're doing well. Listen, we've got two presentations that I know are going to help you. The first one's on generations. The second one is a keynote on one of the books that Sarah mentioned, Kid Jacked, A Father's Story. Also, I know that you're busy, you're doing things, you've got your cell phone. That's great. Keep it by you, because during both presentations, I'm going to ask you to text me so that I can give you copies of these presentations, and also you can receive PDFs of both of my books, because you're in healthcare and I want to give extra. For this particular presentation, I'm going to ask some questions when we're talking about generations, and I would like you to answer in the chat box. Or if you have a question, put it in the chat box, and Sarah, Andrea, Kelly will be looking at it, and then they'll go, "Hey, Scott," and then we'll get to those as we're moving along. I have to be honest, the reason I started doing this particular presentation is about 10 years ago. I saw a gentleman speaking on generations, and he was really, really good as a speaker, but his information stunk. And it stunk because at the time he was bashing millennials, and he was butting up heads with different generations. And as I was watching him, I'm like, doesn't seem right to me. I don't like it. I researched, I dug in, and I learned a lot, and I realized that he was wrong. And I wanted to flip that about 180 degrees and fly millennials flag high. And now I also have included, of course, Gen Z, and for really, really good reason. Now, I know that there are some folks that have questions, thoughts about different generations, and that's great. We'll get into that. But I wanted to let you know, this is all about me sharing with you what connects generations. Think about it. I speak at probably 35 conferences a year. So I am almost always the outsider, whether it's healthcare or financial or HR or whatever it is. But I have all this information that I've procured by studying, researching, writing, and so forth, but also that you share with me at conferences, and I'm able to bring it to you and really give you an outlook that might be outside your industry or outside the place where you work. And I think that's really beneficial. So moving along, this is what we're going to talk about. Really a personal connection. I want to share with you, and if we were live right now, I'd ask for a show of hands, but if you're managing people, if there's anybody who reports to you, this is really important for you, because the way I used to manage my team at this Berkshire Hathaway company, it was a sales team for years, and they were great, is I looked at them as individuals. We would have meetings together, and things, but I had to treat each person on my team as an individual because they all looked at things from different perspectives. They all had different talents. So instead of just saying one size fits all, a long time ago, I figured out, hey, it doesn't fit all. We need to make sure, I need to make sure as a leader that I'm listening to what you have to say. I'm really focusing on what's important to you, and I'm helping you move forward so you can achieve your goals, make more money, look good, and make me look good too. And in your case, well, you're just saving lives, making things better for people, which is incredible, which is about as high as it gets. I want to talk about managing that talent. We're going to define today who they are. We're going to talk about what they want from work today, some of the different characteristics, and how to communicate with each generation. I'm going to give you a generalization on generations today. I'm going to give you information that's chock full of knowledge. Now, you might think to yourself when you're placed in a box for a generation that that's where you belong. And it's just numbers that the government came up with based on certain statistics and so forth. But what I like to remind us all of is that normally we're part of two generations. I'm a boomer Xer. I'm a young boomer, and I very much relate to Xers, boomers, and in all generations, but I'm definitely part of two generations, especially if you're on the cusp, on that line where you're going to feel that. So when I'm saying this to you, if you feel, that's me, that's not, that's okay. Generalization on generations. Now, I'm going to ask you, wherever you are, just to raise your hand if you've ever gone out on a date before. You don't even have to raise it on here. Just raise your hand wherever you are, right? Because I can see everyone. No, I can't. I want you to think back. I want you to go back in your life to the first date you ever went out on. Who was that person? And then I want you to think about how that date came about. For me, when I was going out, there were only really a couple of ways that we could get together with people and connect with people. It was either passing a note in class, talking to somebody in the hallway, and then there's this, right? The wall-mounted phone, push button, thankfully, and that's what we had in our home. Now, if you're a millennial, you may not even know about these. I mean, you do, but you rarely use them. So a little empathy is good. But here's what happened. Diane was in my class. We were in 8th grade. She was beautiful. She was intelligent. And I really, really wanted to go out with her. But whatever the opposite of game is what I had. I had no game. So what I decided to do is I wanted to have my posse with me, my team, my crew. So I was at home at the dinner table with my older brother, Bruce, my older sister, Carol, and I got up the nerve and I took the phone and I dialed Diane's number, and the cord, right? It only goes so far, you know, it could go about 6 feet if you stretch it. So I just got around the corner and I get Diane on the phone. I'm like, hi, Diane, it's Scott from homeroom. I hope you're doing good. Hi, Scott. Oh, it's nice to hear from you. No game. Remember, I'm sitting here sweating. I'm stuttering. I'm like, so I was wondering if maybe like you want to go out to a movie or get some dinner or something like that. Oh, yes, Scott, that'd be great. Why don't we talk tomorrow in school? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'll talk to you tomorrow. Remember, the cord, 6 feet. I had to go around the corner to hang up the phone. As I'm doing that, right before I hang up the phone, my older brother Bruce yells out, Scotty's in love with you. So any chance I had of looking cool, which was minimal anyway, was gone. I did get my brother back. Another story for another day, but he didn't mess with me after that. Anyway, when we connect with people, when we connect with different generations, we have to understand that we grew up differently. Dating today, well, it's pretty much done either in person or online. There's dating sites. There's a million apps you can go to. Of course, you can text an IM and do all these other things with folks. So there's a lot of ways, but when I was growing up, there were only a few. The point is, when we connect with people, we have to remember that they have different perspectives. We have to remember that they grew up in different parts of the state, the country, the world. They're different ages, and all of that is okay. But in order to understand and work with one another, we need to communicate well. Well, we're going to talk about 5 generations. Really, I'm going to focus on 4 of the 5 that are mainly in the workplace at this time. Now I'm going to show you how we grow communications. And I've also learned throughout the years that there aren't that many differences between generations. There's some, but every generation moves this country forward. They just do it in their own way. And I'm okay with that. That's fine. Let's talk about these folks. I want you to see who they are. I want you to understand. And as I said again, it's a generalization. These are the numbers that come from the government to show us where generations begin and where they end. These folks obviously were incredibly important to our country and still are. There aren't a lot in the workplace anymore. There's some, and they consult. They were told when they were young that they wouldn't amount from too much. They were leaving the farm. They fought in a war, and they said, you're going to go to the cities. You're going to become soft. Yeah, they became something, a pretty awesome generation, as generations before them were and generations after. An important generation. Baby boomers. We're going to talk about this generation. If you're a boomer, this is when you were born. And I'm going to give you stats, very accurate stats that you can use to bring back to the workplace or just keep them here. I want to start off with, who are some boomers so you can relate to the age group? There's George, right? Okay, no problem. Pee-wee, okay, wait, he is, but there you go. George, Oprah, boomer, some successful dudes and dudettes. Let's talk about this generation. There's some important things, no matter where you are, if you're 18 or you're 88 and you're on this or you're listening, that I want you to understand. First of all, our world was this computer. It used to be an office floor, then it got shrunk down to just one office and no fire hazards here with the boxes on top. But that's how we did it back in the day, cardboard boxes on top of electrical equipment. But things were different. Madison Avenue did advertising that we had never seen before. Are you kidding me? A TV in the palm of your hand? Unbelievable. You could take that TV outside, you could plug it in, you could move the antenna, and you could get 3, maybe 4 channels. No remote yet, but that's okay. We were outside and it was cool. And obviously, you may not do it in December, but you could do it, and it was really wonderful. Let's talk about who these folks are, because it's important. 25% of the workforce is a big number. Boomers are still major players in today's healthcare environment, as you know. And who they are on the left, pretty easy. This is what was going on. Prefer face-to-face communication, true, but text and email are fine. Good with technology, not great. Just throwing this out there. If we have an issue outside of work with technology, who do we call? We call our kids, right? Our kids, who are millennials, help us out. They take care of things and they make things function for us better. Sometimes my son Jonathan will go, "Hey, Dad, did you try Googling it yet?" I'm like, "I don't want to Google it. I just want you to tell me how to do it. And I wanted to hear your voice." Workaholics. Yeah, that's true. Workaholics came out because nobody was telling us to stop working. The generations before us made it so that we could have a home that we owned, a car, maybe 2 cars, holy cow. And we would work a lot of hours. And sometimes when we were working, we didn't exactly know when to stop. Workaholics, that's us. Sorry, we did that. Thankfully, Gen X would come along and change all that. We'll get into that generation in a little while. We like meetings. We can work remote. When I had meetings, I didn't like long meetings. So I would hold my meetings where it was fun, informative, some food, and then we would hit the road and go back to our lives and sell and spend time with family and friends. The generation before us was my way or the highway, right? Patton and Margaret Thatcher and Tough. We became more mutually respectful. We were kinder. We weren't great at balancing family and life yet, but we were getting better. And title and recognition, important. The silver tsunami, we'll talk about that. And the age range, 58 to 78. Now, before I move on and I give you more information about this generation, I would like you in the chat box, if you would, to please let me know some challenges you're having working with boomers, or things that are working really well working with boomers, or any thoughts you may have on boomers and generation in the healthcare workplace. Specifically, though, I want to focus on boomers. And the reason that this is important is because we'll all learn. If we were together live, and hopefully we'll do that next year or at another date, we would be talking about this live and hands would be going up. So because we're in the comfort of our office or at home, let's do that anyway, because I want us to share. So in the chat box, if you would, let me know some challenges you're having, or some victories working with boomers, or some concerns that you may have. And if we can do this, we'll be able to amplify our knowledge and have some good conversations. I'll give it just a minute because I know sometimes from putting information into the chat and it going through, that takes a little bit of time as well. And Sarah, Andrea, as questions come through, feel free to jump in and just let me know the first name of the person, if you would, and then we'll chat.
Perfect. So far, I actually put in that a challenge I have is I find boomers to be resistant to change. Not all of them, but a good handful. Fern says, great work ethic. Some have difficulty with computers. Maggie says, issues with new tech and hard to change. Maggie, I understand. Thomas says they can sometimes get frustrated with work ethics of others. And then Beth says resistant to change, technology difficulties, difficulty working with the younger generation. Paula, non-boomers don't have the competence that boomers can do the work. Agreed. Jenny has a pro historical knowledge and proprietary information. Kathleen, challenge, difficulty with technology, incredible knowledge base. Mary gets work done, but not always good at thinking out of the box. I'm just going to keep going till you tell me not to, until I stop.
All right, but wait.
Okay. I got one more and that's it.
Gotcha.
And then Andrea just said the baby boomer generation are often in leadership roles and are receptive of new ideas and appreciate strong work ethic. The challenge I have experienced is that some are resistant to working with a supervisor who's younger than them.
Yes. Wow.
I threw a lot at you. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. This is great. I scribbled down some notes. And if I'm not hitting on everything, that's only because A, I didn't write it all down, or we only have so much time. But Andrea, or anybody, let me know, Sarah, if there's something else I should cover. So let's talk about resistant to change. As a boomer, I'd like to say that's absolutely wrong. I love change. I'll change anytime. So look, I get that. I actually have a presentation on how to successfully navigate change. I learned how to do it professionally. I learned how to do it personally. And I realized that people needed it. And boy, did they need it the last 3 years. So I started that a bunch of years ago, and it's a good presentation. People really enjoy it. And I agree. Something interesting happens. What happens is, as we get older, we are resistant to change because A, it's a pain in the butt to change. We've changed a billion times. B, we're not always thrilled about the change. And C, we tend to kind of get more comfortable. We've done stuff. So everything you're saying about change, I hear you. And obviously it's real. What do we do about that specifically with boomers? If there's an issue that's important, we need to choose the important ones, sit down with them one-on-one in a nice way and explain, this is what's happening. I need you to fill it in. What can I do to help? And then we have to be really cognizant of listening well, listening to what they're saying. Now, it's not just a gripe session. It's not just a this and that on their part. I'm here, I'm asking what I can do to help you because here's some change. And I see that you're either not wanting to do it or pushing back. And we really can't because we need to do this to move forward. So what can I do to help? Having conversations one-on-one is important. Now you can have them as a group too, just not mention any names. And ask, how do you navigate change? How did you navigate this? And people will share and folks can learn that way. With technology, look, it's no surprise. There are things that are going to come up, and in 20 years, millennials are going to sit there who are going to still be in the workplace, and they're going to be going, oh my gosh, this is so much different than when I was young. And it's true, that does happen. So it's important that if you want to stay under the umbrella of boomers that they're not quite as good with technology or they're not as good with technology, okay. If they're slowing things down too much, then help them get up to speed. Have somebody mentor them, spend a little extra time with them, and oftentimes that little bit more caring and love can help push them forward. Yeah, I mean, some of the things that I do, speaking, some of my friends at different generations go, how did you learn that? How do you even get that? I was taught. I studied and I had people teach me, oftentimes younger. So that's how I became pretty good with technology and all these other things. I would listen and I would ask. Oh, here's one. They don't like getting managed by people younger. The easy answer to that is tough beans. You got no choice. But the answer that I like to share, and the one that, again, I've received from hundreds, thousands of people in leadership roles, is we need to have these conversations. Look, I understand that I'm younger than you. No apologies. You're older than me. No apologies. We were born when we were born. But we have this relationship now, and I've been able to go from where I am to this position, and you've been around and you've got a ton of knowledge. I want to work together. I want to communicate together, and I want us to be able to have a relationship that's mutually respectful, and one that really helps us grow. Is there anything that I can do to help that? Then you sit back again and you listen. People will share, but some folks are fine. They don't have a problem. Others have a real problem. It used to be 5 and 10 years ago when millennials were younger, people were like, I can't believe I've got a millennial. Well, you know, the oldest is like 38 or 39 now. So big difference there. Not always confident in the quality. You know what? I can say that of every generation, but it's true with boomers. You can have issues going, I'm not sure that they're going to get this right. If there's somebody who's doing that and it's wasting time, money, or could hurt somebody, obviously you need to have that conversation. But if the quality isn't good on a regular basis, then you also need to sit down and have that conversation, because you can't have that. I don't care if you're 20 or 80, you still have to deliver good work. Frustrated, yes, they can get frustrated because they've had to deal with stuff longer. It's really that simple. Not an excuse. It's the reality of the way things are. Look, I'm 60 years old. I've dealt with this longer than you 30-year-old, twice as long. You have, and you've gone through a lot, but it's okay if they're frustrated. It's not your job to fix frustrated. It's your job to fix other things like communication, getting better with tech, helping them successfully navigate change. Strong work ethic. They do. Not all, but most do. But I find that true of all generations. But boomers definitely do it. It was pounded into us by the generations before us. Okay, so I've answered some of that. Sarah, is there anything else I should answer that wasn't answered, or should we move on? Your show, you get to choose.
I think you're good. I think you hit them all because a lot of them were similar. You know, I think,
Great question.
I think that shows the trend, but yeah, you hit everything.
I want to thank you all for participating. It helps a lot. If I missed something or you have a comment on what I said, put it in the chat. We'll have several more opportunities for this. And the talented Sarah will get to that, and we'll be able to hopefully cover as much as we can. But thank you for participating, all of you in the chat. It helps us all. This slide really speaks for itself. There's a few things I need to point out. It's important to have them as contract workers after retirement in healthcare. They're not going quietly, and I know Gen X and boomers are going, and millennials are going, come on. And millions do need the money. And that silver tsunami I was talking about in the last slide, near the bottom, it had nothing to do with George Clooney, sorry, but I did put him up twice, so you know. There's 10,000 boomers retiring every day. Every day. Now you can do the math, that's 3.5 million. Who's going to replace them? Well, that's a good question. I'm here to help you with that and show you how to attract folks, but also connect with everyone. Who's going to replace them? It's simple. Gen Xers all the way, and millennials, the ones who wanted to be able to climb the ladder quicker, their time has come. And then thankfully, Gen Z is here as well to help us out. And we'll talk more about that generation down the line. Some important numbers for you to wrap your mind around. As we move forward, I want you to think about, there's around 333 million in the US right now. And of course, that number keeps on growing. And here's where the generations fit in. Also, I want you to think that it's 2023 already, because it is just around the corner. And these numbers were predicted through a lot of statistics back in 2021. And this is where the numbers are projected to be in 2030. That's 7 years from now. Are you ready? Millennials will be the #1 generation in the workforce. By the way, they already are, but a lot of people don't know that. Just saying. Gen Z is going to be huge giant. Gen X, big participators, but some will be retiring. and boomers will be around in 2030, but not that many. But still several million. My Xers. I love Xers. I'm married to an Xer, Meg. She's great. Tell you about her later. It's not a tell you about her later. It's like, I'll tell you about her later. This is when you were born. If you're an Xer, you know that. And we're going to talk about this generation. I also want to talk about what it's like working with them from a boomer, millennial, or Gen Z perspective. Some famous Xers: Julia, pretty awesome actress; Jimmy, goofball, talented, funny guy; Jamie, really multi-talented, and like Julia, Academy Award-winning actor. Incredible. So just to give you an idea who some famous Xers are. Remember that entire computer? Do you remember that whole office room filled with computers? And that's how they did things. Well, now Gen X grew up with this. It was a desktop computer. Sometimes the keyboards would be different colors, whatever. And there was, to the left, that floppy disk that would go into the lower right-hand part of the computer, right? You remember that, and a floppy disk would be inserted into the computer, and you could take information and you could save it, and then you could take the information as you were growing up as an Xer, and you could email it to nobody because we didn't have the internet yet. It's okay. That's okay. You could use FedEx, and you couldn't use FedEx either because the dude who got a C on his project in college, because the professor said it ain't gonna work, hadn't quite come up with the final ways FedEx would work. So there was no FedEx. So you'd have to take the disk and either mail it or run it to Brenda at the other side of the office, and you'd be out of breath, and she'd put it in the computer, and everybody'd stand back making sure that it doesn't like blow up or whatever, because then you'd have IT coming in, and IT is like the sheriff, and they walk in there and they're like, all right, back away. What did you do? And you feel like crap because you think you did something wrong, but you really didn't. You just put the floppy disk in. So that's how we had information. That's how we shared information. I'm sharing this with you to remind you. Remember the phone and me talking to Diane? Things change, but we're from different generations, and we grew up in different parts of the country, the state, the world. So we look at things from different perspectives. Look at the computer. Imagine working with that today. Not so cool, not so fast, and no internet. Ooh. Look at this. Back in the day, I get these for free now at conferences. I don't use them, but I still get them from time to time. Okay, who is Gen X? Who are you? You're huge as far as the workforce goes. 33%. More Gen Xers than boomers. Also, obviously, in leadership roles throughout. You know when you were born. You know where your age is at the bottom, between 40 and 57. How do they communicate? However you want. They're great. Independent and follows fewer rules is my favorite thing about this generation. If I had to pick one thing, I could pick several, but you know, they began to question things more. Why are we doing it this way? Why can't we change it and do it this way? It'll be faster, we'll be more productive. Generations before, like my generation, we would do that, but we weren't given as much of an ability to question. We go as far as we could, but then we were stopped. This generation could go a lot further. Thankfully, they did. They made the workplace better. They make the world better, as every generation does. This generation rocks. They want fast, immediate feedback. If you're talking to a Gen Xer, the last thing they want is a long, drawn-out diatribe on stuff. Just give it to them and let them know what's going on. Remote, no problem. Every generation can do remote pretty well now. We've gotten really good at it over the last several years. And some people, it's not just generationally specific, some individuals would prefer to be in an office with people. Some want hybrid and some love remote. Now, this generation also has a few other things going on. And from a leadership perspective, I'd like you to keep this in your mind. They are a sandwich generation. Right now, they're still sandwiched between boomers, big generation, and millennials, huge generation. So they have these two generations, but they also have something else going on. It's their turn by age to still be raising children, have kids in school, and parents that are aging. What does that mean? It means that they're really busy outside of work, really busy at work, and they may have to take a parent to a doctor's appointment. They may have to do something else for their kid. We need to understand this and hopefully have some flexibility when it comes to creating a schedule that they can really, really work with. They're busy. And if you understand this, you'll be able to retain them more. Now, Gen Xers, oftentimes in my presentations, I can have 1,000 people in the room. When I ask, okay, what's going on with Generation X? Any Gen X issues you have, they almost get a pass. So I would like to ask, any challenges, anything you're noticing, anything great that they do. And I'm sure if you're a Gen Xer, you may put in the chat box, well, we're awesome. I've seen that before, and it's hard to deny. Gen X is really, really good. So, question, Gen X, any thoughts, concerns, issues, or are we all going to just give them a pass? I'll let you decide. Quick sip. They're that good. Well, you know, I'm not surprised.
Maggie said have learned to balance things.
Well, Maggie, you're absolutely right. They are the first ones that were able to have the work-life balance thing really help out their generation and other generations. And because of that, it has moved its way into millennials. It's moved its way into Gen Z, and boomers also look at it and like, yeah, I need to do that. I needed to do that. I am doing that. And Gen X, because other generations moved things forward, Gen X was able to really make that work and go, hey, my life outside of work is important, and so is my job. It's a great point, Maggie.
Andrea also said that Gen X comes with a broad age range. So some are closer to her parents' age, some closer to her age. So across the generation, there are different dynamics.
Yeah, they totally are. You know, when you have a generation that's 15, 20 years old, it's a great point, Andrea. You're going to have mindsets that are a little bit different if it's one part of the generation or the opposite, the younger part. That's very true. We see things from different perspectives, which is okay. You know, the biggest thing, I talk about it in change, I talk about it in a lot of my presentations and training, is listening. I call it shut up and listen. And the reason I do that is it gets people to listen. And the reason it's so important is because before the pandemic, pre-pandemic, listening was important. During and post-pandemic, it was monumentally important because we all had so much going on. There were so many things that were happening, and we needed to make sure that we were communicating. So from a leadership, a management perspective, listening to what individual employees had to say was essential. And I hope that we continue, I hope that you continue doing that every day, professionally as well as personally, because it does make a difference. What else do we have, Sarah?
Kathleen put in good communicators. They're very direct.
Good communicators, very direct. They are. It's true. They rock that way too. They do. It's interesting. They're able to kind of balance between millennial and Gen and boomers, and they do a good job of it. So there's so much going on with this generation, so much positive, just like the boomers, just like Gen Z and millennials. What
Our
else we got?
last comment is bridge generation, and they're very resourceful.
Resourceful, bridge generation. Yeah, you know what I'm hearing from all of you, and thank you for that. I'm hearing the same thing I usually hear. Gen X rocks. And I never get tired of hearing that, and either does Gen X. This is a good generation. And I'm telling you that what you're saying is wonderful. And it's said by people in healthcare, outside of healthcare about this generation quite often. So when I hear these things, I'm like, okay, yeah, pretty much standard. They get 2 thumbs up. Okay, thank you all of you again for participating. I wanted to give you a couple more characteristics, some things to consider. Boy, are they flexible. And again, we're kind of like hanging out, right? Spending time together. So no, I'm not going to be on stage at a conference sipping my coffee, but yeah, got my green screen behind me. I'm in my home office. What the heck? Remember, I promised. Take out your phone. All you have to do is text 66866, and I will give you this entire presentation. Or you can just email me and put in subject line AHIAHEC, which is a long acronym for, you know what it means. And I'll send you this presentation, and you'll also have an opportunity to press something and get a copy of not one, but both of the books that Andrea mentioned. I'm sorry, Sarah mentioned it. Andrea was doing something else. 66866. I'll share that with you again later in the next presentation. This is not coming from me. This is coming from conferences and me taking notes when people were speaking. I'm like, well, what do we not like from managers? What can make us look for other opportunities or lower our productivity? Remember I mentioned listening? It is essential today. It's really important. Obviously, none of us, no one on this call likes mean, rude, or jerky people. We tend to, right? And micromanaging, not good. And if people want to share information, ideas, and knowledge, we should allow them to do that. That's how we grow productivity. That's how we grow retention and grow communications between coworkers and generations. I know none of you are this, but you know someone who is. Millennials. What can I say about millennials? I love them. Literally, I have a son, Jonathan, and a daughter, Allie, Alexandra, who are millennials. Love millennials. They're great. Let's talk about this generation. Here's where you fall in, age-wise, and look what happened at the computer. That's pretty much what I'm running this entire program on. And I've got a high-def camera and all this other stuff attached and things over here. And I'm running everything on this computer. Pretty cool how generations have changed. This is what millennials grew up with. This is what they knew. They saw the desktop. They got it. But then things quickly changed. And this is their life. Advertising from Madison Avenue. Apple asked them to think differently. Boy, did they get that message. So, most important thing, if you remember one thing, remember this. The #1 generation in the workplace in America and in other countries are millennials. They are the #1 generation. Not Xers, not enough. Not boomers, too many have retired. Millennials are #1, and they're going to be age range 25 to 38. So when there are people who have issues with millennials, that's cool. When there are people that have some questions or concerns, that's fine. You need to talk, you need to communicate, and you need to listen, because not only are they not going anywhere, but it's going to be their way, because they're a big generation and they're moving things forward in a millennial way, just like Xers are doing and have done, just like boomers are doing and have done. But remember what I said earlier, every generation moves this country forward. They just do it in their own way. Some stats, some quick stats. They are totally open to new ideas. Yes, they think outside the box like Gen X, and boomers can do that too. I mean, I know I do, but I'm not a millennial or an Xer. Prefer text and communication and email communication. So completely talk face to face, of course, or whatever. If you leave them a voicemail, they may not get that right away. Yes, they adapt to remote work easily, very entrepreneurial. They start their own companies. They like to wear sandals. Now, in the workplace, you can do it in an office, but not so much if you're in a clinic or a hospital. People will say they're uncommitted to their jobs. Not necessarily true. Statistic, ready? Millennials and Gen X change jobs about the same number of times. It's enough years now, we know that. So everybody's going, oh, these guys don't want. Not true. Seems so, but not so much. They work only the required number of hours and little more. I would like to ask you if that is an issue for you where you work. If it is, please let me know how it is in the chat, and we'll get to that. Prefer direct communications, feedback, and praise. Look, I have to be honest with you. We understand this generation. They rock, but when my kids were growing up and they were in soccer and they were doing other things, they would get a ribbon or a trophy if they came in 15th place. We told them how great they were. We told them that they could become anything they want. They know that it was put in here, and they believe that. They believe it at work, and they believe it in their lives. So positive feedback that we've given them since they were little kids and they grew is something that they take with them to the workplace. Now, when it comes to communication, I want you to think of Toastmasters. Toastmasters is this incredible organization all throughout your state and all over America and across the globe, and it allows people to become better speakers so that they can speak better at work, do a presentation better, but they're very supportive. And one of the things they do when you're doing a 5 or 7 minute presentation at the end is they evaluate you. And what they'll often do is they'll tell you, your evaluator will tell you a couple of things that you did that were really great in your presentation. And then maybe one thing that you can work on next time to become better. Perhaps it's not saying the word every 5th time or 5th word. The little things. So when you're talking to this generation, if you want to get through to them, it's also really good to say some things that they're rocking at, and then something that you need them to focus on more. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to give you more information. So type away as I continue to give you more information. Simple question. Talk to me about working with millennials. What are you seeing? What works? What is challenging? Go. Chat away, please. I want to hear what's working, what's challenging, and we'll address as much of that as we possibly can over the next 26 or 27 minutes. What's working with millennials? What would you like to work a little better? While we're doing that, just want to give you an idea of some famous millennials. Lady Gaga, Academy Award, really, really talented. Giannis, Milwaukee Bucks, humble, really talented, really kind. A lot of us used his company today. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. Millennial. Interesting. I see that we have some comments.
Yeah.
I would love to hear, Sarah, what folks have to say about this.
Yeah.
Really cool
So
job.
they have high expectations. Sorry, Fern said they have high expectations of their employers. Paula said some act like know-it-alls. I said, as a millennial myself, the constantly changing and new ideas that they want to implement and I want to implement can be good, but also can be bad. Sometimes it's nicer to just stick with the good old way that things have been done. Nancy says cell phone usage. Mary says often have great out of the box ideas and sometimes have a sense of entitlement without the effort.
Ah,
Couple big ones.
yeah.
Yep.
Cool. What else you got?
Andrea
good?
said, different values across the board. Many appreciate flexibility and paid time off over salary and opportunities for advancement. This is something I have come to also value as I have advanced in my career. And then Kelly said, sometimes hesitant to call someone when contact is needed versus text or email.
Yes, different ways of communication. Thank you for all those. I would like the person who said higher expectations to elaborate on that for a moment, or better yet, just unmute yourself because I want to understand what you meant by that. If you would. Let me know what you meant by
Hi, this
higher
is Fern. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I think what I'm talking about is that they have things that they want from their employers, whereas I feel the older generations above them weren't so much expecting things from the employer.
Can you give me an example or two of things that they want?
Benefits, time off, flexibility, change of policies,
Gotcha.
doing things new ways.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you for that. All of these are good. Yeah.
I want to just add on to that. Fern, I think you're completely right. You know, a few of us are on an employee committee at AHI, and we have this talk a lot with our HR department about, you know, here's what everyone wants, and it's those benefits and those days off. But there's only so many things that we can give without remembering that this is your job. And I think a lot of times you'll find younger generations, and maybe I'm saying that in the worst way in a generations talk, but they almost feel like they're offering the company something better than the fact that the company is giving them a job.
Okay, cool. Thank you for all that. I appreciate it. I'm going to chat about a few of these. First of all, you know, I have to be honest. When we talk about millennials, sometimes they really get a bad rap, and that's the reason I got into this, as I mentioned earlier. I think that with this generation, there's several things we need to understand. A, their voice is extremely powerful. So listening to them and working with them is essential because we need them. Now, when it comes to benefits, time off, and trying to change policy, well, okay, so let's take Gen X and millennials and combine them together for a moment. And let's take the gigantic company Northwestern Mutual out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that does insurance and does money and is very conservative and very, very successful, and they ooze money. In being conservative, they also had a very conservative dress policy at work. Stockings, dresses, skirts, ties, sport coats, suits. That was it until enough millennials and Xers said, hey, why are we doing this? Why do I have to dress so uncomfortable the whole day when I'm in an office or on a phone or doing this and that? And it was because of that this company and others implemented a dress for your day policy. When you're at work, if you want to wear a nice pair of business slacks or khakis or this or that, enjoy. Dress for your day, dress down, no cut off jeans or torn stuff, but and it was because of millennials and Gen X. Otherwise, that wouldn't have happened. So when it comes to policy, that policy rippled through the financial industries and other industries. So policies can be changed, but not all, but they are going to try. And that's okay, because that's what they want to do. When it comes to benefits, yes, people want benefits. And money is more important to them than it is to Gen Z right now, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And time off, yeah, they want time off. You only get a certain amount because of the policy. Now, if you're finding out where you work that you're losing a lot of people and it's only because of your time off policy, then that, and trust me, I speak at a lot of HR conferences, state and national, SHRM, and throughout Canada as well. That's a real issue, but these discussions need to be had. And as long as it's not the number one reason we're losing people, it's a discussion you can have and hopefully address. So it's a great point, and thank you for getting on and talking about that. New ideas, yeah, they've got new ideas all the time. Other generations do too. Listen, sometimes we may be able to implement them and other times not, but it's still important to listen to ideas and the sharing of information and knowledge. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we can also find out if there's something going on in our particular department or where we work that we need to address. Cell phones, it ain't changing. They grew up with them, kind of, especially Gen Z. It's a big deal. Here's my thing. If it bothers you that they're on a cell phone, okay, let it go. If they're productive and they're doing their job and they get their job done and you look week after week and month after month and they're doing it, let the cell thing go. That's on you, not them. Flexibility, they do want flexibility. There is more flexibility, and we have found at different ages that flexibility is really a good thing. So it's not just this generation, but it is a big deal with them. You all gave great thoughts on that. I appreciate it. I wanted to also give you a little bit more about this generation, because real quick, let's go back. So the youngest is like 26 or so, and then up to 38. So this generation has kids of their own. They're grown adults. Sometimes people don't look at it that way when I talk to companies, and they're still, oh, well, I'm like, well, okay. And then they remember they have kids or grandkids from their millennial kids. So it's like interesting. Remember, on the left are some things I want you to know about this generation and think about. Columbine and 9/11 were a long time ago. It's still tough out there. Take them seriously. There's still people that are like, I don't have to communicate with them. They don't know. Wrong. You're going to lose them if you don't take them seriously. And they also like funny. Be a likable person if you're leading. You don't have to have one-liners all the time, but be good and engage them. They're very open. Ask them what they think about something. They'll tell you. It may happen too. You may implement something. The positive news before the negative news. I mentioned that. That's a great way to communicate with anyone, including this generation. Something to think about. That's a lot of people. We always say, oh, they don't work enough hours and this and that. First of all, if you're scheduled to work 8 or 10 hours and you work 8 or 10 hours, you've done your thing. And this generation believes that because they have a big life outside of work. They put in their time and they don't want to put in extra time. That's on you, not them. They don't have to, but a lot of people do put in more than 40 hours. I know some of these people. Some of them are in healthcare. Some of them are not. The bottom one, retiring before reaching 65. Hey, great. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but you know. Some more things to consider. And as I mentioned before, you text me, you'll get all this anyway, so you don't have to write it all down. I mentioned they're number one. Yeah. It's just going like this all the time. So people who are trying to battle them instead of listening, coming to an agreement and having good communications, they're going to lose. I have heard from a lot of millennials, I don't need to be met with all the time, but it's like, I don't even hear from my manager. They're not even around. There's some things I need to bounce off of them. Sometimes they get back to me, sometimes they don't. Are you ready for this? Do you have enough staff? How do we retain them? Is there flexibility? This is something I heard a bunch of times. You know, I'm asked to do something and have it in by December. I'm asked to do something and I'm told it needs to be done right away. But I found out they don't need it till December 20th. Why didn't they tell me that? I'd get it done by the 19th, by the 15th, or tomorrow, but I need to know if there's flexibility. And you want to be more involved in work so you can perhaps advance your career? Show them how they can assist.
Scott, we have one question from Mary that just says, what does that mean? Less than 30% are engaged in their work.
It means that according to statistics, about 30-ish% said that they were engaged in their work and that they really felt like their company and their management were bringing them in and engaging them. Now, there's ways to grow productivity. There's ways to increase that. But according to some statistics, so I thought I'd put that one out there because it, as I read more, I was like, yeah, it seems to kind of be, and what people tell me, they're not that engaged. Well, how do we engage them? It's going to sound like a broken record, but it works. Listen. Listen. Listen, let them share ideas, information, and knowledge. It goes for Gen X and it goes for boomers as well. But in order to keep folks engaged, we need to listen and try to give them reasons to stay productive. Again, having some fun at work is important as well. It's a good question. Gen Z, I want to talk about this generation because we have 14 minutes left. You can see who they are on the left. The number's increasing dramatically as the workforce number goes. 86 million of them. They're the number one generation in America now, but not the number one generation in the workforce. Look at what they've done, who they are. Look at what they've had to deal with. I call this generation millennials on steroids. What they are is they're really, really quick. They can do all this stuff and they're millennials and they've got all that, but they're really Gen Z. And the other thing about them is that they're kind of scared. So they're more reserved because they've seen all the stuff that's gone on over many years and people debt from college and all this stuff going on. And they're a little bit more conservative and afraid. They're going to also stay at jobs longer right now. By the way, this is just to give you an information from a hiring perspective. The number one generation in America on Twitter is Gen Z. Is your HR department, are you reaching out and posting on Twitter? You should, because these folks are on Twitter. Who knew, right? But they are. How they work, they are convinced it's brutal. They're going to stay at a job if they can find one. Now, working with Gen Z, if you have any thoughts, any questions on this generation, I'll tell you something else, and I'll get into this in the next few slides. This generation doesn't necessarily go directly from high school to college. While they've graduated college, some of them already, they want to go from high school to the workforce, get more experience, take classes at night, graduate online, Go in person and get their 2- and 4-year degree that way. Also, maybe where they're working will help pay so they don't accumulate as much debt. Now, if you're going to be a doctor or a nurse practitioner, you probably can't do that. But if you're not, and it's not essential that you have a 4-year degree, we need to be cognizant of that, because look at the number, 86 million. If you thought millennials were big, and they are, so is this generation. And this generation is going to insist on doing things a certain way. And one of the things they're showing us now is, I'm going from high school to the workplace first. Some are going to college. Feel free, if you have any thoughts or questions regarding this generation, to pop it in the chat, and we'll get to that as I give you a little more information. Any thoughts, any concerns, any comments? You are working with this generation now. Some of them are at work, where you work, 18 to 25. Absolutely. Look at what happened to the computer. Remember, I had to use the phone to get in touch with Diane. I couldn't text her. There was no texting. Ugh, it wasn't fun. It wasn't easy, but that's what I had. Each generation has things differently, and we need to remember when we're communicating that they've grown up differently. How do we manage this generation? They want to be able to trust you. They want to know that, and they're comfortable being monitored. They've been monitored. They were monitored going through school. It's hard for them to trust their manager, but you can earn it. Check in with me, but quick. Remember, millennials on steroids. They're moving fast. Not frequently. Again, any thoughts or comments, anything you want to share, any concerns, any ideas, pop it in the chat box. I know it's newer for us, but as 2023 rolls around and the next couple of years, you're going to have a lot more Gen Z in the workplace. What do you got, Sarah?
Maggie said, it's interesting to watch. I have triplets in this generation that are now in the workplace.
Wow, very cool. My brother has triplets. I guess that goes around sometimes. Very cool. They're young millennials, just a little older than the oldest Gen Z. Yeah, it is interesting to watch as we get older and we watch younger people. I try to keep my thing is anything from 10 years old and on, I want to get to know you and spend time, because there's so much that you can teach me. Except for Ava, my goddaughter, who's 8, of course, I love her. But there's so much to learn, and if we're open to different generations, and my gosh, watching Gen Z, Maggie knows, having a trip, unbelievable how they process things, how quick they are, how their perspectives on things are different, and that's also going to translate into the workplace. They are very social, very individual. They will come to work going, hey, I don't have a ton of work experience, but I have life experience, and I'm also global. I speak to people all over the globe. I've got a lot that I can share and offer. Just a little bit more to chew on as we circle home. And technology, we know it's important to them. They were born with cell phones, so they get all that. We're talking about productivity and how to be flexible and get people to stay at work. Here's one of the ways that really, really helps: a happier workplace environment. I hear that all the time. There's things that we can do. What I'd like, because we still have a few minutes and then I'm going to round the corner, and we're going to finish up, then we're going to take a 15-minute break, is I'd like to know, is there anything that you're doing or the workplace is doing to help staff Be happier. It could be we bring in lunch once a month, a little gas card, warm mittens. Is there anything that you're doing that helps grow productivity by keeping staff happier? And the reason I asked that is because statistic after statistic shows happier employees stay. They don't look for jobs as much and they're more productive. So if there's anything you're doing, feel free to pop that in there and mingle, listen, ask questions. Very important. Oh, QR code if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can take a screenshot or you can just zap that with your phone. People are always going, how do I get, oh, here, I made it easy, QR code. Of course, you have to have a bottom line, right? I firmly believe that you're the one who plays a huge role in staff development, and maximizing the strengths of each generation by growing communications and utilizing that, sharing of information, ideas, and knowledge. Mentoring, I know there aren't a ton of mentoring programs. There should be more because people want that. It helps them learn, and statistically, those who are mentored climb up the ladder quicker. They've got more game. They've learned more. A couple of things about millennials. I won't read it. I just want you to kind of understand.
While everyone's reading, Andrea did put in the chat, as a supervisor, I feel it's important to be mindful that everyone has a life outside of work and to take an interest helping, which helps to foster a positive working relationship with your team. And as she is my supervisor, I do agree. And then Kathleen said, potluck lunches, paint and sip events, compliment coin jars, peer-to-peer and management, flexibility and generous PTO.
You know, Kathleen, thank you. Andrea, thank you. It's all great. It's yes and yes to everything you said. Those things work. And if you look in the chat, you'll be able to see that in case you want to remember some ideas that work. We're learning more and more about Gen Z in the workplace. I wanted to give you as much as I possibly could during this presentation. I did a study over 5 years. And in this study, I wanted to find out what connected all of us, all 5 generations. I wanted to know what was really important. And as I compiled the information and I had my team look at it with me, I had 13 things. 13 things does not fit on a slide that well, but 7 does. So I boiled it down to the top 7 things that really connect all of us. And here's what I came up with. Here's what was shared with me. In no specific order, respect is important. Listening before the pandemic, during and post, really important. Some leaders need to be trained to listen better. Others do. Andrea gets it. A lot of us get it. Some people that we work with might need to be trained to do that a little better. Mentoring and training. This isn't brought up enough. I will tell you, people want this. They share it with me a lot. And when they do, I remind them that it works. I can show you statistic after statistic with cool names and studies that show how mentoring helps, reverse mentoring helps, and people climb the ladder quicker. The big picture, I only bring this up because it was important before, and then during the pandemic, it became really important. We were sharing the big picture a lot during the pandemic. People still want to see that. Workers want to know where we're going to be in a month and in 6 months, where we're heading, what the vision is, what's the big picture. Share it with us. We're part of a team. Don't hold back. Don't keep it. We want to see it, please. Also, communicate with us. Let us know. Talk. As I mentioned, short communications usually work the best. Positive feedback. If there were 3,000 people on here, I'm pretty sure that everyone would go, yes, I appreciate positive feedback. Can we do a better job of that? And then lastly, the thing that people really, really want, no matter what the generation is, if they have ideas, information, and knowledge, are they able to share them? A, without getting a timeout or getting fired, or B, is there opportunities to do that? And will people listen? Because it grows relationships between generations and it helps us learn from one another. I'm not in healthcare. I have the good fortune of speaking at healthcare events and coming into companies and so forth quite often throughout the year. And I can tell you one thing, I have friends that do marvelous things in healthcare, and I so appreciate what you do. It's so important. You don't hear it enough, but what you do makes a huge difference. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for taking time this morning on Tuesday. Thank you for your commitment to healthcare. And we're going to take a 15-minute break. So I would say, right around, let's shoot for 11:20, 11:35. Let's start at 11:35. We'll come back and got a different path I'm going to take you on than this one. So thank you so much for your time. See you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, that worked well.
As soon as I see it tick, I'll go.
All right, so 1 sec, I just have to see if I can do this. And then do this. There we go. All right.
Perfect.
No, it will let me do my thing.
Good.
No,
All right.
it's tricky, but it works good. We like technology.
That's right. So we'll get started on the next section of the presentation. For anyone who was with us from the beginning, please stay muted. If you will, obviously, a few people will probably be hopping on throughout. If you have questions, place them in the chat. There will be a portion of this part of the presentation that Scott will ask you to unmute. So just know that that'll be out there. But if you are unmuted at a different time, you'll probably see us muting you. And if you're having issues unmuting, just let us know in the chat when it comes time. But other than that, I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you very much. We're shifting from generations to one of the books I wrote, Kid Jack the Father Story. And I'm going to take you on a journey. So sit back, relax, check your email if you'd like, but pretty soon you won't want to. What would you do if you woke up one morning minding your own business and those most precious to you in the whole world were gone? Freak out? Frantically phone a few friends, maybe freak out some more. That's what I did. These are my kids, Jonathan and Alexandra. He's about 5 years old in this picture, and Allie's 3 years old. They were kidnapped and taken to the Middle East by the person I trusted most, their mother, my wife, Lisa. There was no warning, there was no note, and there were no kids. And check this out. When this tragic event in my life occurred, I quickly realized there were no signed international laws requiring my wife to return our kids. No signed international laws. I thought to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I love these kids. Jonathan was the king of questions. You know the type. Daddy, why doesn't the moon fall down and squish us? How come there's so many pieces of sand on the beach? And my favorite, I'm sure he got it from me. Daddy, can I have just one more piece of candy, please? And Allie, fearless, the queen of climbing. We'd sit on our couch and she'd climb up onto my back and shoulders and on top of my head and go up, up, up. They were kidnapped. And I did not know what I was going to do. It was tough. Now, I realize that you have probably never had your children kidnapped and taken to a Middle Eastern country. I get that. But I'm willing to bet you that something's happened to you or someone you know that's made you feel the same way. I had this core belief that our kids could use their mother and father in their lives, and that was just stripped away, as was my kids' right to have a dad. We've all had some heart-wrenching event that's rocked our life to its very foundations. What is it that you have had to work through? Perhaps it was the death of a loved one or a relationship that was once close, or maybe somebody gave you or somebody you care about a diagnosis, the doctor that you really didn't want to hear. Now, I want to let you know, before I move on, that this ends well. So sit back, relax, and let me take you on a journey. Folks, I was a mess. This was so far out of my league, and my particular skill sets did not include ways of dealing with this type of situation. Oh yeah, and I was really, really, really angry. Don't get me wrong. I knew I'd have to come up with some way to rescue my kids, even if it meant deceiving Lisa and her family. But my immediate problem, besides my kids being half a world away, is my stress level was way up here, as you can imagine. And I had to come up with ways to bring it down to manageable levels if I was going to have a chance of reuniting with my kids. Now, I want to confide in you that during this particular period in my life, there were moments of every day, sometimes hours, where I would have pity parties, I would cry, I would yell, I would bang on the walls. That didn't really help. But I had to keep it together. I had no choice, right? Doesn't it stink when you have this going on in your life? Some of these words you can relate to. Sometimes they all happen within 1 week or 1 day, and you're like, come on. What happens to us when we face difficult situations, professionally and personally? Well, we don't eat as well, and we probably don't sleep as well. And exercise programs, they tend to decrease instead of increasing at a time we could really use them. So wherever you are, if you've ever been in this position, just say, I get it. Should be all of us. You know, I was a mess. I didn't know what to do. But when I started to get a hold of what was going on in my life, something beautiful happened. Deep breathing. It was weird, but I was watching TV and I was flipping through some channels trying to figure out what I was going to do. And a lady came on and she started talking about the power of deep breathing. And she had this calming, wonderful voice. And she said, when you breathe in through your nose 5 times and out through your mouth, your stress level goes down and your energy level increases. And I really needed that. And I'm a type A kind of guy. And I thought to myself, okay, I got this. And I'm sitting on the couch and I'm practicing deep breathing. And I got up to about 7 times and I literally got woozy. Thankfully, I'm sitting on the couch, but it works. Try it with me 1 time. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Deep breathing does work. And it was one of the beginning ideas that was implanted into me that I could use to lower my stress. I also found out that deep breathing works just about anywhere, anytime. If you're driving to or from work, or deep breathing. If you're about to have that meeting with somebody you may not want to have that meeting with, deep breathing. I did find out, though, I was talking to my friend Bobby on the phone, and we're, he's giving me thoughts and insight. And it's like, what else have you got, buddy? What's going on? And I'm like, well, I'm talking to him and he stops me. He goes, buddy, what are you doing? He called me buddy. I called him buddy. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, that song. I said, oh, I'm just nervous, man. I'm practicing deep breathing. And he said, you know what? You need to stop that. That's really creepy. So when you're talking to somebody on the phone, you probably don't want to practice deep breathing. All right, lesson learned. But otherwise, it works really well. I could tell I was heading down a dangerous road where I might just curl into a ball. I had hit rock bottom. I thought about just tossing in the towel and moving on with my life, curl up into a little ball and just say, it's it. I have to move on. Thing is, every scenario I play back in my mind, and trust me, I have an active imagination. And every action plan that I wrote down had me reuniting with Jonathan and Alexandra. That's crazy, right? Deep breathing helps us reduce stress. The second thing that I learned as I'm leading a team, I mentioned earlier in the generations presentation, at a big Berkshire Hathaway company, a sales team, award-winning, great people. I'm trying to keep all that together and do all this. One of the things I also had to do was open up to others. Deep breathing works. Opening up to others was a challenge. I was embarrassed. I had this invisible, impenetrable wall, and I needed to lower it. I needed to create some space, some wiggle room to allow people in my lives and help me. And I spoke to friends, family, coworkers, and acquaintances to see if anybody had just a nugget of information that might help move me forward, even if it was just an inch at a time. And I learned some things about opening up to others I'd like to share. First of all, we are hardwired as human beings to help. When someone asks us for help, unless we sense danger, we're going to generally see if we can help them. And that's what I learned. People were incredibly kind, and I spoke to friends, family, coworkers, and acquaintances. And as I was doing this, I learned how wonderful we are. And people would give me fresh ways of looking at my particular situation that I hadn't thought of. They were giving me energy, and they were helping me look at this from multiple perspectives. What about you? Do you need to open up more, share with some people about some things going on professionally or personally? I know it's tough to do, but once you start, it becomes easier, and people are so willing to help. I also learned a couple of important lessons. When you ask people for help, some folks are going to want to share with you everything that they know. All the worldly knowledge that they've accumulated throughout their lifetime, they're going to want to bestow upon you. But in the end, it's really up to us, right, to decide what to keep and what to toss out. I also learned that when we're opening up to others, you have to be careful, because there's going to be some people, the negative ones, you know who they are. They're going to tell you, oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't leave that relationship. I wouldn't change jobs. I wouldn't go for that promotion. I wouldn't travel there. You're probably going to want to spend less time with the negative people and more time with the people that have got your back. Now, I could tell as I was explaining my horrific situation to people that they had a more realistic idea of the probable outcome than I did, but people were incredibly willing to help. My friend Coco, she was there for me. Coco's about 4'9". She's Italian and Jewish, powerful combination, but she has one of those personalities that's like 6'8". It's like when she's around, you know she's around, and she's great. We were having brunch on a Sunday, and we're at a restaurant, and she's like, okay, Scotty, tell me what's going on. How can I help? And I'm telling her what I know, how much I know of the situation. And in the middle of our conversation, she slammed her hands down on the table. The silverware jumped up in the air, and I'm looking around. I'm like, oh boy, I've seen this before, but never in my direction. Coco's about to go Coco on me. Scotty, I can't take it anymore. We got to do something, man. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to find some mercenaries and hire them. get a jet plane, fly to Israel, get your kids on that plane and bring them back home. Do you understand? I did understand. And I appreciated her passion and sage advice. My tank was nearing empty. I needed people to help with their energy and give me whatever ideas they had. And then, as I said earlier, we keep what we want and toss out what we don't. But I needed that. And we finished brunch. I paid, walked outside, gave her a big hug. Then I went home. Coco went back home to her husband, my good friend, Howard. And that night, I was sitting at the table. I decided to treat myself to a nice dinner because it had been a couple of tough weeks. So I made myself a hungry man, and I'm starting to pick through the food. And I've got this sitting on the table, and I'm looking at this beautiful picture and the food in front of me in the tray. And I'm like, is this food the same as that picture? Whatever, I've got to eat. So I ate. And I'm starting to think about my conversation with Coco. And I'm like, okay, if I try to do what Coco suggested and I get caught, I could end up in jail and in prison. How would that get my kids back? That would stink. Or I could get killed. That won't reunite me with my kids. That won't get Jonathan and Alexandra back. Oh, I wasn't sure. I honestly wasn't sure what to do. But as I was talking to people, something interesting happened. You know, deep breathing was wonderful. And opening up to others really did give me fresh perspectives and also let me know if I was heading down a path I probably don't want to go down. And then this happened by accident. As I would talk to people, I would hold between my thumb and index finger, down by my waist or underneath the table if I'm sitting down. I would hold between my thumb and index finger the real possibility of reuniting with Jonathan and Alexandra. This mind-body connection is really powerful. And in between my fingers was the clear realization that I would come up with some way to make my desire become a reality. Do me a favor, put your fingers together nice and tight. Feel the pressure in your hand, maybe in your arm, the pressure that you feel when there's something that you need to focus on. What is it that you want to focus on? What is it that you want to remember? Your family, your children, your spouse, your significant other, your health, your self-esteem, your job. Whatever it is, if you're willing to keep that which is most precious to you right here, you'll continue moving forward towards that which matters to you the most. Go ahead, you can release your fingers. Not sure why this mind-body connection works, but it does. 90 days passed. I talked with local, state, and federal officials, and none of them could help me. And attorneys that I spoke to all over the globe soberly reminded me that because Israel hadn't signed this important document called the Hague Convention on International Aspects of Child Abduction, Lisa was under no obligation to return our kids home ever. Now, ever is a really long time. In the upper left-hand corner of my bathroom mirror was a picture I had taken of the kids just 2 weeks before they were kidjacked. I had to come up with a different name than kidnapped. When I said it, it made me cry. It made me weak. I was in the bathroom shaving and my eyes were darting back and forth between the picture and my face. The picture, and that's when it hit me. I had been plotting and planning and role-playing with people for months now on ways to go around Lisa to get our kids back, but I was doing it wrong. I needed to go through her. And that for me was a huge epiphany. And I finished shaving and I washed up and dried off, and I went downstairs and I started doing this crazy dance that would have gotten me kicked off of any reality show, but I didn't care. I was moving forward. And I sat down to have breakfast. And I ate, put the dishes in the sink, and headed off to work. I was still meeting with clients, with my team, because I knew that we would need money, and this wasn't moving that fast, so I had to still work. And that's when, by accident, like the rest of this, I discovered a way of lowering our stress, of lowering my stress. We've talked about deep breathing. We've talked about opening up to others. And I talked about listening. But there's also the power of music. Now, I know our taste in tunes may be different. Some of us might like to listen to Disney. I don't know. But even though our taste in tunes are different, the end result is still the same. When I think of the music I like, it's the Beatles, it's the Rolling Stones, it's Sheryl Crow, it's anything Motown, it's Bob Marley, it's Steely Dan. When I hear certain songs, it makes me feel great. And I'm driving in the car and an old Beatles tune comes on and it's Love Me Do. And I'm bopping out and I'm like, love, love me do. You know, I love you. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great, but why am I having fun when my world's crashing around me? And that's when another song came on, Waiting on a Friend by the Rolling Stones, and it made me think of my friend Buddy, who said I was creepy for breathing on the phone, and he was right. But I felt great, and I wanted to know what was happening, why I felt so good. So I will share with you, after some research, what I learned. But before I do, this is your opportunity. If you would unmute yourself and just yell out the group or the band that you like, and then mute yourself, I'd love to hear. Go ahead.
Blackberry Smoke.
You
Nice.
too.
Who else?
Aerosmith.
Oh yeah, I always get Aerosmith, usually Journey. Yeah, yeah. Who else?
Rusted Root.
Rusted Root, never heard of that. I like that. You have to check them out. Anyone else? Okay. So as I did some research, because I needed to have that feeling more, and these things were working for me to reduce stress, I found out it was dopamine, right? That feel-good neurochemical that gets dripped into the pleasure senses of our brain makes us feel fantastic. And this is what music does for us. The movie that we see that we would give 10 stars to if we could, dopamine. The foods that we love, dopamine. The music that we love, dopamine. The next time you're stressed out, put on your Beats, strap in your headset, put in your AirPods, crank up the tunes at home or in your car, and allow yourself to get lost in your music and watch the stress melt away. Now, you know what to do. 4 months had passed. That's a long time. That's a lot of days and a lot of hours. And Lisa finally began speaking to me. This was huge. Did she get the flowers I sent her? The notes I sent her? The exploding piñata? I'm kidding. I didn't send her any flowers. She said to me, Scott, I'm not mad at you. You've done nothing wrong. It's just that our kids need their mother and a father isn't as necessary. I explained to her that our kids did need their father to read to them, to play with them, to tuck them in at night. When I had a chance to speak to Jonathan, he said, Daddy, Mommy said we're not coming home. I didn't know what to say to him. There was no book on how to get your kids back from the Middle East when they're kidnapped. Sweetheart, I love you. I love you so much. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. Tell Allie I love her too. Okay, Daddy, put Mommy back on the phone. Lisa, you can't do this. This isn't right. You've got to come back with the kids. We have to talk about this. No, Scott, my mind's made up. You've done nothing wrong. I love you, but I'm staying here with the kids. I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed the phone down. I yelled. I walked outside, started cruising the sidewalk in my neighborhood, and I was not happy. I was not doing well. And I thought to myself, think, come on, man, you've got to make this work. What is it that you know? Okay, I know that I'll do anything under the sun to be with my kids, and I'll do whatever it takes to get them back home. Oh my gosh. I can't trust Lisa anymore. Our marriage is over. That stung. Next thing I did was a big move. I went back home and I sat down and I started looking at a book that I had read about Shack. Not that Shack. Come on, buddy, move away. Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton. And I was reading the book because I thought it was really cool, but it also gave me strength. Ernest Shackleton was an extraordinary British explorer whose focus was on the South Pole because he was crazy. In 1915 and 1916, he made the third of 3 explorations on a sailing vessel called Endurance. There were 28 men on board. When Shackleton reached Antarctica, the winter ice became thick and their ship was trapped for weeks. That's cold. Shackleton ordered everything to be taken off of the ship, and they would remove everything from the ship that they possibly could: the lifeboats, the gear, the provisions, the navigation equipment, the food, the sled dogs, the rowboats. And they were living on thick sheets of ice they called an ocean camp. And a week or two later, they watched helplessly, as their journals show us, as the ice and water grabbed the Endurance and slowly took her under. They were able to make their way to Elephant Island, which is an interesting name for an island in that part of the world, because I'm pretty sure there's no elephants on that frozen chunk of ice and land. And they set up a temporary camp. They used sails from the Endurance to block the wind and as a roof. Many weeks passed. Beards grew. Shackleton got the men together and he said, folks, men, here's the deal. We have just so much food left and we can survive for a while and we can catch some food perhaps, but it's not enough for us to sustain. We have to get out of here. I know that there's a whaling village 750 miles away on South Georgia Island. If we can reach that village, we'll be safe. And I can get provisions and ships to bring us back home. So on his orders, they took the largest of the 3 lifeboats and repurposed, just like we need to do in our lives and at work all the time, repurposed using wood from another one of the lifeboats to shore up the sides of this open ocean vessel. And they put together the lifeboat and had provisions, a prismatic compass, charts, an anchor, binoculars, food, and these 5 men, these 5 brave men, set off to reach South Georgia Island. They almost capsized twice. Death was really close, but it did not get them. Using and repurposing again a sail from the Endurance, they were able to put that up in the rowboat and reach South Georgia Island in just over 16 days. That's pretty incredible. Once on the island, they realized that they landed on the wrong side, and separating them from the whaling village was a mountain 4,500 feet. After several days of rest, Shackleton selected 2 of the crew. And these 3 brave men set out to traverse the mountain in front of them, and they slowly made their way up. And at the summit, they could see the whaling village below. And like kids, they slid down about 800 feet, and then they used rope And they cut up Iceland Mountain and slowly made their way down. They were greeted by a village boy who ran to get the manager, Mr. Sorrell, who welcomed them. They shaved and cleaned up and ate well. And then in a ship lent to them by the whalers, went around the island and picked up their other mates. It took them 3 attempts in 3 ships lent to them by different countries before they were able to navigate the thick, jagged ice. But they did it. 105 days of loneliness was over for the men who saw the ship coming into port, and their captain waving his hand. He hadn't forgotten them. He did exactly what he said he would do. Rescue every one of them. I wonder if Jack and Rose wish that Shackleton were the captain on the Titanic that fateful night. At least he knew how to navigate ice-covered oceans. And those on the island wasted no time in asking how quickly they could leave, and it happened pretty quick. And they all made it back home. All 28. They had suffered. They had stories to tell, and they lived to share those with us. That was over 100 years ago. Their focus was never on limited resources, which we face sometimes, or tough situations. Instead, with the leadership of who would become Sir Ernest Shackleton, they were reminded that resourcefulness and ingenuity, it often requires considering multiple angles of the same resources. Something we need to do with our teams, something we need to do with our budgets, sometimes in our life. While at home, I had to figure out my next goal. It wasn't going to be sailing to Antarctica, but I had to figure out how to get the kids home. Shackleton did it. Why couldn't I? It's when I realized so many stories of people doing things that are incredible. Our mind, your mind is designed to get you what you want. We just have to work through it. And I did with Julie. This turned out to be a big move. I hired Julie because I needed an attorney. But my attorney had to have certain things. So as I was interviewing people, they had to practice family law. They had to have a reputation as being tough, or a pit bull of an attorney. And I also wanted an attorney that felt passionate about my case. And Julie was all 3 of those. We were sitting in her office at the firm she worked at a big conference table after 7 or 8 meetings, and I had brought in lunch, and we're strategizing how to get through the Hague Treaty and what we can do internationally. And I said, Julie, Lisa's finally begun speaking to me more. She's given me permission to see her and to visit her and the kids. So I'm going to fly to Israel and see the kids and try to get them home. And I'm eating my sandwich, and yeah, she's an attorney, right? So she's making little notes, and I'm like, okay. What are you writing? She said, oh, nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm eating more. She puts her pen down. She takes a sip of her Diet Coke, puts the can down. Scott, what are you, nuts? This is the Middle East we're talking about. You can't go over there. I can't protect you when you're over there. This has bad written all over it. It could go south really quickly. Let's come up with some other options, and we'll work through this together so that we, you, us, can get your kids home. Julie, I'm open. What else do you have? Talk to me. I want to know. She goes, well, I don't have anything yet. And I stopped her. I said, look, we've talked to lawyers everywhere. We've gone to state and government agencies, federal. There's nothing we can do unless you can come up with something else. I'm flying over there to see if I can get the kids back. And I needed to have divorce papers ready to serve Lisa when I come back. Just give me 2 days. I'm going to fly there and back within a week. I'll have jet lag and it's going to be tough, but I'm going to figure it out. She tried for the next hour to convince me to take more time. I wouldn't have it. I was in. Lisa was talking to me. I had this small window of opportunity to go in. I was going to go see them. We finished up our meeting, put our lunch in the garbage. She walked me out to the outer office and to the door and gave me an uncharacteristic hug and said, Scott, as soon as you get home, call me. I want to know that you're safe with the children. I thought that was pretty cool. 5 months to the day, Jonathan and Alexandra were kidjacked. I boarded an LL Airlines jet for a 13-hour flight from Chicago International Airport to Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, Israel. It's a long flight. I had taken it before, but I was so nervous. I didn't know what awaited me over there. Lisa was one of 7 kids. 2 of her brothers are police officers, and we were really tight and have a good relationship, but I wasn't sure what she said. The plane took off. We had food, then the lights went down so we could sleep at night. And there was a gentleman right in front of me. I was on the row. He was in the row in front of me. And when the lights went down, he started to sleep and he snored. He was easily 90, easily. He was an older gentleman. When the light went down, he snored and he kept rows 15 through 18 the entire flight. And I'm bumping his chair a little bit. People are elbowing him and he would toss and turn, but he slept like a baby. Thankfully, 13 hours later, we did land in Tel Aviv. And our plane pulled up to the gate. We got off the plane, walked past the soldiers with their machine guns at the ready, and onto passport control. And I collected my bag and I walked outside, and it was a bright, sunny day. And there was a fence about 30 feet away, 4.5 feet high. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people behind that fence waiting for friends, family, and loved ones and coworkers from all over the world on different flights. And I'm looking for Jonathan and Alexandra, and I can't see them. And all of a sudden, I see Jonathan, and he runs through the people somehow into my arms. I'm like, oh, sweetheart, I love you so much. I missed you. Daddy, I missed you too. But Mommy said we're still not going home. Oh, don't worry, baby. Everything will be okay. Now, I don't know how Ellie did this, but I almost lost it. With her little red curls bouncing in the breeze, I looked up, and there she was, and I picked her up. Oh, sweetheart. I love you so much. I missed you. You're such a good girl. I love you too, Daddy. And I held Ellie, and Jonathan took my suitcase on wheels, and we walked out, and there was Lisa, and I put Ellie down, and she held onto my leg, and I gave Lisa a big hug and kiss and said, I missed you. And she said, I missed you too. I had a role to play, and I was not going to break character. We went to pick up the rent-a-car that I had rented, and we drove to her family's house in Tiberias. And there we were met by her 6 brothers and sisters, assorted aunts and uncles and cousins that had to be there, her mom and dad, and it was a lot of people. It was a ton of food, enough to feed like 5 homes. It was overwhelming. I ate, but I needed a place to sleep. I hadn't slept in well over 24 hours. I was exhausted. Before I move on, if you would like this presentation and a chance to get my books, text 66866 or email me and put this conference in the subject line, and I will make sure that you get them. They showed me a room to sleep in. I had been in that room before. It was air conditioned, it was cozy, and I went to bed. And I woke up 12 hours later. I slept really, really long. And I woke up and I was groggy. I didn't know exactly where I was for a moment. And then I realized where I was, and I put my feet on the floor and I sat on the edge of the bed. I'm like, okay, you've got this. And I walked outside, and the kids were sitting in the living room on the floor, having breakfast with their little cousins and watching Sesame Street in Hebrew, Rehov Sumsum. There they were, and I gave them big hugs and I kissed them and told them how much I love them. And they said they loved me too. And then they went back to hanging out with their cousins, watching their show and eating. Kids are so resilient. Oh my gosh. I just wish I could click my heels and bring them home, but that's not how things work. And I said hello to the people that were milling about and got a cup of coffee. And then I just sat down outside for a few minutes under a tree at the table, and it was already hot. It was a hot day. The sun was up and I could tell it was going to be a scorcher. And I'm just sitting there minding my own business. And who should come out to sit with me, bringing a tray of watermelon, but Lisa's father, Joseph, the alpha male. Now in his early 60s, his shirt was off. I could tell he was once a man of great strength and power. And I made a management decision right there on the spot that I was not going to intimidate him by taking off my shirt. We sat and we ate watermelon, spit the seeds on the ground. And Joseph cut right to the chase. Scott, Lisa tells me you want to go home to America with her and Jonathan to sell your house and move to Israel. Is that correct? Yes, Joseph, I'd like to go home with Jonathan and Ellie and Lisa and get all the paperwork together, sell the house, and they can spend time with their family and we'll all come back together. Scott, I will miss Jonathan and Alexandra too much if you take them. You leave them here. You and Lisa do what you need to do, and we will watch the kids good, and then you come back. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it at all, but I can tell you how it made me feel. Have you ever been driving your car, minding your own business, and you look in the rearview mirror and you see those red and blue lights flashing, and you realize as your heart goes from right around here down to your ankles that you're getting pulled over? That feeling, coupled with the heat and the loss of air in my lungs, made me feel like I was going to pass out. I was just going to pass out. And I looked at Joseph and gave him a half-hearted smile. And then it dawned on me, it hit me where I was. It was the Middle East. I was far from home, but it was man to man. There was one hand left I could play. Joseph, thank you so much for the kind offer. I really appreciate it. But this could take 3 or 4 months to sell our house and get all the paperwork approved and start shipping things over here. That's just too long for the kids to be away from their mother and father. I'd like to take them with us and they can spend time with their family there. Then we'll all come back together. Well, people in the Middle East, I knew this, but I had forgotten. They have a penetrating stare. When they look at you, they don't look away. It's like they can read your mind. In the West, we talk and we look away a little bit as we're talking. Not over there. It's right at you. It seemed like 20 or 30 seconds. It was probably more like 5 or 7. Scott, if you want to go home with Lisa and the kids to sell your house and move back here to Israel, I will give permission for that. I couldn't believe it. I was halfway home. And then inside, I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? I have to get permission to take my kids home? But as they say over there, oi. That night, I was in downtown Tiberias, wining and dining Lisa. The kids were back up at the house, sleeping. Scott, did you mean what you said to my dad? Would you really move to Israel? I said something, a recycled line of hers years ago. I thought it might resonate with her. Lisa, it doesn't matter where we are. As long as we're together, that's all that really matters. Knowing that the next person who spoke would probably lose and it wasn't going to be me, I just sat there and smiled. And she looked at me and she picked up her red wine and took a sip. The jury was out. She put her glass down. Okay, Scott, let's do it. Let's take the kids. Let's go home. Let's sell our house. And then we'll all come back together. I couldn't believe it. I was halfway home. But we weren't home yet. 4 days later, in the car that I rented with Jonathan and Ellie in the back seat and Lisa and I in the front seat, we drove to Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. Following us in 2 separate cars was Lisa's entire family. We descended upon the airport. I returned the rental car. And then we checked in for our flight. International flight, you have to get there several hours before, all checked in, everything is good. And we're sitting there with her family, drinking tea and coffee and water and juice and having bagels and pastry and fruit. My Hebrew isn't great, but body language, I understand that a little bit. I could understand, and I could see that there were some people who might have had some issues with her going. I kept looking at my Timex, trying to make the watch go faster. Finally, a few hours later, they made the announcement that our flight was getting ready to board, and I mentioned that to Lisa, and we gave her hugs and goodbyes on the cheeks to her family, and we took the kids. And the only way I could get home, the only way I could get my kids back, unless you were a fan of Coco, remember her idea in the Mercenaries? With our kids in tow, we walked onto an LL Airlines jet and took our seats. There we were, the four of us, sitting down. I'm hoping that the plane loads quickly. And then about an hour later, everybody was on, everything was set. They went through all their security protocols. They closed the door and we began to back away from the gate. And then we began to head towards the runway, and then we slowed down and stopped. Odd. I could hear the engines go down, but they were still running and the air was on. And I'm like, okay, this is strange. And I looked at my watch and we're there for 5 minutes. And then I looked out the windows and I could see red and blue lights from Army and police vehicles heading in the general direction of our plane, big plane. And that's when I realized that the gig was up. Remember, I told you 2 of Lisa's brothers were cops, they're police officers, and somebody figured something out. And I also told you earlier that I have this active imagination. So I knew that they were going to come to the door, open it up, and these big armed guards were going to come directly to my seat because it's an LL Airlines jet and they know where you're sitting, what you're going to do the next day. I don't know how, but they know all this stuff, great security. And I figured they were going to whisk me off the plane and take me to a small dark room for questioning. I look at my watch, 10 minutes have gone by. And as I'm scouting things out, I see where the exit doors are. And I think, okay, here's your chance. You go to an exit door, you disarm it, you open it up. It's a long way down, but you're going to land it and you're going to tuck and you're going to roll like they do. And then you're going to run. And I'm like, where are you going? This is Israel. It's like they're not set up for that. God, you're lame. 15 minutes went by. I'm trying to play with the kids and give them attention, but I couldn't focus. It had been a long bunch of days. 25 minutes passed. The pilot got on. He said that we've been cleared for takeoff. I don't know where those vehicles were going, but thankfully it wasn't in our direction. Turned up the engines and we coasted down parallel to our runway, and then he took a left and then another left. And he hit the engines and we went down the runway and we went up into the air and we turned over the Mediterranean Sea. And then we began to head west towards Europe, west towards home. We're flying for about 15 minutes and I'm literally pinching myself. I wanted to and was willing to slap myself, but I didn't want to freak everyone out. I thought I was dreaming. Am I about to do what most people, including myself, thought could never be done? If you've ever traveled overseas before, and many of us have, you know there's no feeling like being home. Your own bed, food. Sometimes you want to wait another week because you know you're going back to work and you'd like to have some more time not working and some more time having fun. I couldn't wait to get back home. They served us food and we ate. And they turned down the lights and everybody tucked in and went to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was thumbing through magazines, but I made sure that the kids were okay. I kept looking and they were there. It wasn't a dream. And many hours later, they turned up the lights and they came around and gave us cloths to wash our faces and to clean up. And I cleaned up the kids and Lisa and I sat down and we had breakfast, a nice meal. And then they collected the trays and I was hanging out with Allie and she wanted to sit on my lap with her purple teddy bear. So I unbuckled her and she sat with me and she started boxing me and I'm boxing her. And Jonathan is looking and I start tickling him and he's tickling me. And I'm like, this is it. You give me $1 billion of this, I want this every time. It was the best feeling. It was great. The pilot got on. He said we were making our initial descent into Chicago. Wow. Those words, boy, did they have an effect on me. I just felt so good. And I put Allie back in her chair and buckled her up gently. And Jonathan was doing some coloring. And I said, we have to put the book away in a few minutes. He said, okay, Daddy. And Lisa was reading some magazines and we made our final preparations, and then the plane slowly, effortlessly glided down and landed. And it was a soft, gentle landing. I couldn't believe it. We went to the end of the runway, and then we took a right to head to the terminal. And I looked out the same window I had looked at hours before to see the police cars and the army vehicles with their lights on. And out that same window, I could see a building off the airport premises with an American flag just kind of waving in the breeze. And that's when I realized that for the first time in over 5 months, I could release my fingers. I was home. We were home. We pulled up to the gate, waited our turn and got off the plane, went through passport control, picked up our luggage, went to customs. You have anything to declare? And what I wanted to say, but I didn't, is, are you kidding? You wouldn't believe what I just did. No, we're good. Thank you. And we walked through and picked up the car that I had parked about a week ago. And we drove home. We drove home to our house, and it was an incredible feeling. Two days later, Lisa was served with divorce papers. She wasn't happy. We had a punishing custody trial. And in the end, the judge awarded me primary placement of Jonathan and Alexandra. And I had the honor and pleasure of raising them, except for a couple of moments during their teenage years. It was quite something that I got to be such a major part of their life, as I had always wanted. I was their dad. Albert Einstein said it best. It's not that I'm so smart, I just stay with problems longer. Yeah, Albert is that smart. Sometimes folks were given a path to go down, a path that we don't choose. It chooses us, but we need to go down that path in order to survive. What is it you want to focus on? What is it that you want to remember? Your friends, your health, your self-esteem, your job, your significant other, your children. Maybe it's your workout regimen. Could be your job. Whatever it is, if you're willing to keep that which is most precious to you right here, you'll continue moving forward towards that which matters to you the most. Because you see, when we focus on these things, when we're truly conscious of them, that's when we make better decisions in our professional and personal lives. As I told you, when Allie was young, she already was fearless. Here she is in Wisconsin, breaking the all-women freeform skydive. More women doing a dive together and connected than ever before in the state of Wisconsin. Yeah, she's kind of fearless. And I love her. And I love Jonathan. Several years later, I started dating and I met an incredible woman, Meg. Meg turned out to be a phenomenal wife, an excellent mother, and a really, really great person too. And really, no family is complete without a golden doodle. So we have Eddie. Angela Duckworth, Dr. Angela Duckworth, did a study that became a TED Talk. She wanted to find out what it was that really made people productive, that really allowed people to excel. What are the advantages that allow people to grow in the workplace, to lead in the workplace? And she interviewed a lot of people because she thought, well, is it IQ? Or is there other things? What is it that matters the most? And in this study that she did, she found out that focus was very important. Income can play and give you a competitive advantage, as can status level. All these things help, and IQ. She said, but that wasn't it. There was one thing that was far more important than everything else, and it showed itself clearly, and that was the one difference, and that was her TED Talk. This was what made a difference: grit. She said, not always the most intelligent people become nurses or doctors or lawyers or business owners. Sure they do, but it's sometimes the people with the grit, the people who hang in there, are the most successful. I believe grit played an important part for me on my webpage. I'm called the Never Give Up guy. I didn't give up. I guess that's grit. You too have this. Please don't forget. Sometimes you need to take this and use this and have the grit and determination to continue moving forward. Again, if you would like to connect on LinkedIn, there's a QR code. Most importantly, what you do, I said it before, I'll say it again. Healthcare is so important in your state. Around the Adirondacks, it's important. You make a huge difference. I hope that both of these presentations have given you some nuggets that you can use professionally and personally. And I want to thank you for your commitment to healthcare and to helping others. Have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and a great holiday season. Thank you.